The cake didn't fall. It flew. Perfect, 3-tiered white fondant wedding cake, something that had taken a bakery 2 days to assemble, left my mother's hands and slammed into my chest with a force that knocked the breath out of me. The room didn't gasp. It didn't scream. It simply stopped. 80 guests froze mid-conversation, mid-sip, mid-smile, as if someone had unplugged the entire house from reality. I didn't feel the humiliation first. I felt the cold. Frosting smeared across my dress, the weight of the tears collapsing against my ribs, the shock of sugar and buttercream sliding down my arms. And then, only then, did the sound return. A single sentence, sharp enough to cut through the silence like a blade. "Look what you made me do." My mother's voice, my mother's rage, my mother's performance. She stood there with her hands still extended, palms sticky with frosting, chest heaving, eyes bright with the kind of fury that only comes from entitlement denied. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't horrified. She was triumphant. She had found her stage, her audience, her moment. And I, Elena Ward, 33 years old, attorney, self-made, self-funded, self-everything, was the villain in her story. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. Because when you grow up with a mother like mine, you learn early that the worst moments don't come with warning signs. They come with precision. They come with choreography. They come with the certainty that she will always choose spectacle over sanity. But even then, even after a lifetime of her theatrics, I wasn't prepared for what came next. My father stepped forward, not to defend me, not to stop her, not to apologize, but to speak. And the way he looked at me, like a man carrying a secret for far too long, told me the cake wasn't the real explosion. It was just the opening act. Before he said a word, I already knew. Something was about to break that couldn't be unbroken. But to understand how we got to that moment, me covered in frosting, my mother shaking with rage, my father trembling with guilt, you need to understand the architecture of my family. Because nothing in that room happened by accident. Nothing in that house ever did. My mother, Linda Ward, had built her life around control. Control of appearances, control of narratives, control of people, especially me. I was the daughter who worked, the daughter who achieved, the daughter who paid her own way through college, through law school, through every bill and burden that came after. My sister, Chloe, was the opposite. The golden child, the adored one, the girl who floated through life on a cushion of parental indulgence, never touching the ground long enough to understand what effort felt like. And then there was my father, Thomas, a man who had mastered the art of quiet survival. He lived in the spaces my mother left empty, in the pauses between her demands, in the shadows of her certainty. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't malicious. He was simply absent, present in body, missing in spine. So when my mother dragged me into my father's study earlier that afternoon, her grip tight, her smile brittle, I already knew something was coming. I just didn't know the scale. She closed the door. She straightened her blouse. She looked at me with the cold efficiency of a CEO preparing to fire an employee.
"Chloe deserves a perfect wedding," she said.
You will contribute $60,000. Not a request, a decree. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. No, I said. Calm, controlled, final. Her smile cracked, her eyes sharpened, her voice dropped. After everything we've done for you? Everything they had done for me? As if my degrees, my career, my life had been handed to me on a silver platter instead of built from scratch with sleepless nights and student loans. I repeated it. No. And that was the moment she decided to destroy me, publicly. She didn't argue. She didn't negotiate. She didn't even raise her voice. She simply walked out of the room, waited for the perfect silence, and detonated the bomb. The cake, the accusation, the humiliation. But the real explosion, the one that would rewrite everything I thought I knew about my family, came from my father. He stepped closer, voice trembling, eyes wet. Elena, there's something your mother never wanted you to know. And in that moment, covered in frosting, surrounded by strangers, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Because whatever he was about to say, I knew it would hurt more than the cake, more than the humiliation, more than the betrayal. It would hurt because it would be the truth. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room was already silent, frozen in that suspended way a crowd becomes when something impossible has just happened. I stood there, with frosting sliding down my arms, my dress ruined, my dignity hanging by a thread. And he looked at me like a man who had finally run out of places to hide. Elena, he said, my name fragile in his mouth. There's something your mother never wanted you to know. My mother stiffened. Her shoulders locked, her jaw tightened. It was the first real crack in her armor in years. She didn't shout. She didn't deny it. She simply whispered, "Thomas, don't." But he did. He stepped closer, his voice trembling not with fear of her, but with the weight of 15 years of silence. "Your grandmother left you money," he said. "A lot of money." The words didn't make sense at first. They floated in the air, disconnected, unreal, like a sentence spoken in a dream. My grandmother? The woman who taught me to braid my hair. The woman who slipped me $20 bills with "for books, not nonsense" written inside. The woman who died when I was in college, leaving a small house, a lavender garden, and a quiet love opposite of my mother's. I swallowed hard. What money? My father's eyes flicked toward my mother, then back to me. "Your inheritance," he said. "Half of her estate. $170,000. The room tilted. Not physically, emotionally. Like the floor shifted a few degrees and only I felt it. I stared at him, waiting for the part where he said he was mistaken, where he said it was a misunderstanding, where he said anything that made this less monstrous. But he didn't. He kept going, each word heavier than the last. "Your mother told the estate attorney you didn't want it." A murmur rippled through the guests. My mother's face drained of color. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. "She said you would waste it," he continued. "That you were irresponsible. That you didn't need it because you were so independent." Independent. The word hit me like a slap. My entire life, my mother weaponized that word. She used it to deny me help, to deny me support, to deny me softness. Now I understood why. She needed me to be independent so she could take what was mine. My voice came out thin, childlike. Where did the money go? My father hesitated. My mother stepped forward, her voice sharp and brittle. I used it for the family! The family. Her favorite shield, her favorite excuse. I stared at her, frosting drying on my skin, humiliation burning through me. For what? I asked. She lifted her chin, defiant. For Chloe. Of course it was for Chloe. The golden child, the sun around which her world revolved. My father exhaled shakily. She used it to pay for Chloe's master's program, he said, and for her first wedding. A gasp rippled through the room. A champagne flute shattered on the floor. I didn't move. I couldn't. My inheritance. My grandmother's gift. The money that could have changed my life at 21. Gone. Spent. Erased. Not for survival. Not for necessity. But for Chloe's tuition and a wedding that lasted 6 months. My mother crossed her arms as if she were the injured party. You never needed it, she said. You've always been fine on your own. There it was, the truth behind every cold comment, every withheld kindness, every moment she chose Chloe over me. I wasn't the daughter she loved. I was the daughter she used. My father looked at me with eyes full of apology he should have given me years ago. I found the paperwork 2 years after it happened, he said quietly. I didn't know what to do. I should have told you. I didn't answer. I couldn't trust my voice. My mother stepped closer, her tone almost pleading. Elena, you have a good job. You make more money than any of us dreamed of. Chloe needed help. You didn't. I felt something inside me snap. Not loudly, not violently, just finally. You stole from me, I said. My mother's eyes flashed. I did what was best for the family. The family. Always the family, always her version of it. I wiped frosting from my cheek. Slow, deliberate. No, I said. You did what was best for Chloe. And for the first time in my life, my mother didn't have a response. The room stayed silent. My father looked at the floor. Chloe stood frozen on the staircase, mascara smudged, her perfect world cracking. And I, covered in cake, stripped of illusions, standing in the ruins of a family I spent years trying to earn a place in, felt something unexpected. Clarity. Because in that moment, I understood something simple and devastating. My mother never wanted a daughter. She wanted an asset. And assets don't get love. They get used. I didn't leave the room right away. People think humiliation makes you run, but it doesn't. Not when it comes from your own mother. Not when it's the kind of humiliation you've been trained your whole life to absorb without flinching. I stood there, frosting drying on my skin. My heart beat loud in my ears. And I watched my mother try to rebuild her mask in real time. She wasn't ashamed. She was calculating. Her eyes darted across the room, scanning the faces of the guests, assessing who believed her version of events, who looked horrified, who looked confused. She was already rewriting the narrative in her head, already preparing the story she would tell tomorrow, next week, next year. In her mind, she wasn't the villain. She was the martyr, the mother pushed too far by an ungrateful daughter. My father stood beside her, shoulders slumped, hands trembling. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Not physically, emotionally, like a man who had finally realized the cost of his silence. I wiped a streak of frosting from my cheek and let it fall to the floor. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked him. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The room was still frozen, still suspended in that strange, breathless quiet that follows a disaster no one knows how to process. My father swallowed hard. "I didn't know how," he said. And by the time I understood what she'd done, it felt too late. My mother snapped her head toward him. "Thomas," she hissed, "stop talking." But he didn't. For the first time in my life, he didn't. "She forged your signature," he said, his voice cracking, "on the inheritance documents. She told the attorney you didn't want the money. She said you were irresponsible, that you'd waste it." My mother's face twisted. "I did what I had to do," she said. "You were in college. You didn't need that money. Chloe did." There it was again. Chloe, always Chloe. I turned toward my sister. She stood on the staircase, her hands gripping the railing, her face pale. She looked like someone who had just realized the ground beneath her wasn't solid, like someone who had believed she was floating because she was special, only to discover she had been carried the whole time. "Did you know?" I asked her. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She shook her head slowly, eyes wide, mascara smudged at the corners. "No," she whispered. "I didn't know about the inheritance, I swear." I believed her. Chloe was many things. Spoiled, oblivious, insulated, but she wasn't malicious. She had been raised to expect the world to bend for her, but she hadn't been the one bending it. That had always been my mother. My mother stepped forward, her voice rising, her hands trembling with indignation rather than remorse. "You have no idea what it takes to keep a family together," she said. "You think your degrees and your job make you better than us? You think you're the only one who works hard? I did what I had to do to give your sister a chance." "A chance at what?" I asked. "A chance at a wedding? A chance at a master's degree she didn't even finish? A chance at a life she never had to build?" My mother's eyes flashed with something sharp and ugly. "She deserved it," she said. "She deserved more than you ever did." The words hit me harder than the cake. Not because they were surprising. Deep down, I had always known. But because she said them out loud, in front of everyone, without shame, without hesitation. She took a step back, then another. "This is not how this was supposed to go," she whispered. I almost laughed again, because that sentence, more than the cake, more than the inheritance, more than the years of manipulation, was the most honest thing she had ever said. My father turned to me. "Elena," he said softly, "I'm sorry." It wasn't enough. It wasn't even close. But it was something. I took a breath, a deep, steadying breath. "I'm leaving," I said. My mother lunged forward. "You can't leave," she said. "Not like this. Not after everything I've done for you." I stepped back. "You haven't done anything for me," I said. "You've done things to me." Her face crumpled, not with remorse, but with rage. "You ungrateful!" I didn't let her finish. I turned, walked toward the door, and felt 80 pairs of eyes follow me. Not with pity, not with judgment, with understanding. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the problem. I was the escape. And as I stepped outside, frosting still clinging to my skin, dress ruined, heart pounding, I realized something simple and devastating. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. I didn't go home after leaving the party. Home felt too small for what had just happened. Too quiet. Too full of memories I didn't want to sit with. Instead, I drove without thinking. Through neighborhoods lit by warm windows, past restaurants spilling laughter onto sidewalks, past people who had no idea that my entire life had just cracked open like a fault line. Michael called twice. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to hear his voice, but because I didn't know how to explain what had happened without breaking apart. I needed stillness. I needed distance. I needed a place where my mother's voice couldn't reach me. I ended up in the parking lot of a closed bookstore, the kind with faded posters in the windows and a sign that flickered even when it wasn't turned on. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing in and out, trying to make sense of the last hour. My inheritance. Gone. Spent. Erased. Not for survival, not for necessity, but for Chloe's life, her education, her wedding, her comfort. And the worst part wasn't the money. It was the choice. The choice my mother made to take something that was mine and give it to someone else without hesitation, without guilt, without even telling me. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. I had spent my entire life believing that if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, became enough, my mother would finally see me, finally value me, finally love me in the way she loved Chloe. But she never had, and she never would. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Michael's voice was soft, careful. Elena, where are you? I swallowed. I don't know. Are you safe? Yes. Do you want me to come to you? I hesitated, then nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yes, I whispered. Please. He didn't ask questions. He didn't push. He simply said, "Send me your location." And I did. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the lot and parked beside me. He didn't rush to my car. He didn't fling open the door. He walked slowly, deliberately, giving me space to breathe. When he reached me, he opened the passenger door and sat down without saying a word. For a long moment, we just sat there, two people in a dark parking lot, breathing the same cold air, letting the silence settle. Finally, he spoke. Tell me what happened. I told him everything. The cake, the accusation, the inheritance, the forged signature, the years of silence. The way my mother had looked at me like I was the problem, not the victim. Michael didn't interrupt. He didn't gasp or swear or shake his head. He listened. Fully. Completely. The way someone listens when they know the story you're telling is going to change everything. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. Elena, he said, this isn't just family drama. This is theft. I know. And fraud. I know. And emotional abuse. I closed my eyes. I know. He reached for my hand, his touch warm and steady. You don't have to handle this alone. I let out a shaky breath. I don't even know where to start. Yes, you do, he said gently. You start by calling an attorney. The word attorney hit me like a jolt. Not because I hadn't thought of it, but because hearing someone else say it made it real. I nodded. I know someone, I said. A colleague. She specializes in estate law. Call her. he said. Tonight. I hesitated. It feels extreme. Michael turned to me, his expression firm. What your mother did was extreme. Getting help isn't. He was right. Of course he was right. But part of me still felt like a child, terrified of making my mother angry, terrified of stepping out of line, terrified of being the one who ruined the family. Michael squeezed my hand. Elena, he said softly, you're not ruining anything. You're protecting yourself. I nodded again, slower this time. Okay. He leaned back in the seat. Do you want to call her now? I took a deep breath. Yes. I dialed the number with trembling fingers. It rang twice before she answered. Elena? Everything okay? No, I said. I need your help. Her voice shifted instantly, professional, focused. Tell me what happened. I told her. Not the emotional parts. Not the cake. Not the humiliation. Just the facts. The inheritance, the forged signature, the misappropriation of funds, the timeline. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. Elena, she said finally, this is serious. I know. This is not a gray area. This is fraud. And depending on the documentation, it could be criminal. My stomach tightened. What do I do? You come to my office tomorrow, she said. We gather everything. We build a case and we file. I closed my eyes. Okay. And Elena? Yes? You're doing the right thing. When I hung up, Michael pulled me into his arms. I let myself lean into him. Let myself feel the weight of everything I had been carrying for years. Expectations, guilt, responsibility, silence, finally begin to loosen. After a while, he whispered, You're not going back there, are you? No, I said. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. He nodded. Good. We sat there until the cold seeped through the windows, and the world outside felt distant enough that I could breathe again. Then Michael said something that stayed with me long after that night. Elena, he said, your mother didn't just steal your money. She stole your story. It's time to take it back. And for the first time in my life, I believed I could. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was replaying the cake, or the humiliation, or the way my mother's voice had sliced through the room like a blade. Those things hurt, yes, but they weren't new. They were just louder versions of wounds I'd carried for years. What kept me awake was something else entirely. Clarity. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother without the fog of obligation, without the weight of hope, without the instinct to excuse her. I saw her as she was, not as the mother I wanted, but as the woman she had chosen to be. And I saw myself, too, not as the daughter she had shaped, but as the woman I had built. By morning, the decision was made. Michael drove me to my attorney's office. He didn't hover, he didn't push, he simply walked beside me, steady and quiet, like someone who understood that the ground beneath me was still shifting. My attorney, Dana, greeted me with the kind of calm that only comes from decades of dealing with other people's disasters. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered structure, and structure was exactly what I needed. Let's start with the documents, she said. I handed her everything I had. Emails, old letters, the estate paperwork my father had found, the forged signature that looked almost like mine but not quite. She examined each page with a precision that made my chest tighten. This is clear, she said. Your mother committed fraud. She misappropriated funds. She deprived you of an inheritance you were legally entitled to. Hearing it stated so plainly made something inside me settle. Not peace, something sharper. Something like resolve. "What happens now?" I asked. "We file a civil claim," she said. "Unjust enrichment, fraudulent misrepresentation, conversion. Depending on how the court views the forged signature, we may also pursue criminal charges." The words felt heavy, but not frightening. They felt right. "Will it go to trial?" "Possibly," she said. "But cases like this often settle, especially when the evidence is this strong." I nodded slowly. "And my mother?" Dana folded her hands. "She will have to respond. She will have to face what she did. Whether she admits it or not is irrelevant. The law doesn't care about her narrative. It cares about the facts." The law. Cold, impersonal, fair. For once, fairness was on my side. We spent hours building the case. Timelines, financial records, statements, affidavits. My father came in halfway through, shoulders hunched, eyes tired. He handed over the original estate documents, his hands shaking as he placed them on the table. "I'm sorry," he said again. This time, I didn't look away. "I know," I said, "but you're doing the right thing now." He nodded, relief flickering across his face like a weak flame. When he left the room, Dana turned to me. "He's afraid," she said. "Of my mother?" "Of himself," she replied. "Of what he allowed. Of what he ignored. Of what he didn't stop." I exhaled slowly. "I don't hate him," I said. "I just don't know what to do with him." "You don't have to decide today." I nodded. By the time we finished, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the office. Dana gathered the documents into a neat stack. "I'll file first thing tomorrow," she said. "You'll receive updates as soon as anything moves." I stood, feeling taller than I had in years. "Thank you." She gave me a small, knowing smile. "You're not the first daughter to walk in here with a story like this," she said. "But you're one of the few who walked in ready to fight." I didn't feel ready, but I felt willing. And sometimes, that's enough. Michael drove us home. The city lights blurred past the windows, soft and distant. When we reached my apartment, he didn't let go of my hand. "You did something huge today," he said. "I did something necessary." He nodded. Both can be true. Inside, I showered off the last traces of frosting, watching the water turn cloudy as it carried away the evidence of yesterday's chaos. When I stepped out, wrapped in a towel, Michael was sitting on the couch with 2 mugs of tea. "You okay?" he asked. I sat beside him. "I don't know," I said, "but I think I will be." He smiled softly. "That's enough for tonight." We talked for hours, not about my mother, not about the case, but about us, about the life we were building, about the wedding we wanted, small and quiet and ours, about the future that finally felt like it belonged to me. At some point, I fell asleep with my head on his shoulder, the mug cooling in my hands. When I woke the next morning, something had shifted. Not the world, me. I felt lighter, not healed, just unburdened. The case moved quickly. My mother was served with the complaint 3 days later. She called me once. I didn't answer. "Elena, you're destroying this family." I deleted it because for the first time in my life, I understood something she never wanted me to realize. I wasn't destroying anything. I was refusing to be destroyed. Her attorney reached out within a week, He wanted to discuss settlement. Of course he did. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged signature alone was enough to sink her. Dana handled everything. I didn't have to speak to my mother once. When the settlement number came in, $192,000, I felt nothing at first. Not joy, not triumph, just a quiet, steady sense of balance being restored. Michael and I sat at the kitchen table, the check between us. "What are you going to do with it?" he asked. I looked at the money. My money. The money that should have been mine at 21, when I was working 2 jobs and eating ramen and studying until my eyes burned. "I'm going to rebuild," I said. And I meant it. Not just my finances, my boundaries, my life. The next day, I opened 3 accounts. One for me, one for our future, and one, yes, for Chloe. Not because she deserved it, but because I refused to let my mother's cruelty define the kind of sister I wanted to be. I sent Chloe the account information with a single message. "This is yours. No conditions." She called me crying. Not performative tears, real ones. "I didn't know," she said. "Elena, I swear I didn't know." "I believe you." "I want to be better," she whispered. "Then start." And for the first time in our lives, I think she meant it. The case was closed. The money was returned. The truth was out. But the story wasn't finished. Not yet. Because healing doesn't come from justice alone. It comes from what you choose to build after. And I was finally ready to build something that belonged to me. The settlement didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like revenge. It didn't even feel like closure. It felt like a door unlocking. Not swinging open, not yet. Just unlocking. For weeks after the case ended, I lived in a strange, quiet space between exhaustion and rebirth. I went to work, I came home, I cooked dinner with Michael, I slept. My days were simple, almost deliberately so. I didn't want noise. I didn't want drama. I didn't want anything that reminded me of the chaos I had walked away from. I wanted stillness. I wanted air. I wanted a life that didn't require me to brace myself every time my phone buzzed. My mother called twice more. I didn't answer either time. The first voicemail was angry, sharp, defensive, full of the same old accusations she had used my entire life. "You've embarrassed this family. You've humiliated me. You've taken things too far." The second voicemail was quieter, not apologetic. My mother didn't know how to apologize, but quieter. "I don't understand why you're doing this. I don't understand why you're shutting me out." I deleted both messages. Not out of spite, out of necessity. Because healing requires distance, and distance requires silence. My father reached out once too. A text message, short, careful. "I hope you're okay. I'm trying to be better." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I finally understood something I had never allowed myself to admit. I didn't owe him anything. Not forgiveness, not anger, not explanation. I owed myself peace. So I wrote back, "I know. Thank you." Nothing more, nothing less. Chloe called often. Not to ask for money, not anymore, but to talk. Really talk. About her life, her mistakes, her blind spots, the ways she had let herself be shaped by our mother's expectations. She cried more than once. She apologized more than once. And each time, I felt something inside me soften. Not toward my mother, but toward her. Chloe wasn't the architect of the damage. She was another product of it. One night she said something that stayed with me. "I always thought Mom loved me more," she whispered. "But now I think she just needed me more. And she needed you to be the strong one so she could keep needing me." I closed my eyes. "That's not love," I said. "I know," she replied. "I'm trying to learn what is." And for the first time in our lives, I believed she meant it. Michael and I planned our wedding slowly, intentionally. No spectacle, no drama, no guest list inflated by obligation. Just the people who had shown up for us when it mattered. 22 guests, a small restored farmhouse in Vermont, candles, soft music, a dinner that stretched late into the night. The morning of the ceremony, I stood in front of the mirror in a simple ivory dress. Nothing extravagant, nothing loud, and felt something I had never felt before a major life event. Calm. Not excitement, not nerves. Calm. Because this time, nothing was being taken from me. Nothing was being demanded of me. Nothing was being stolen or twisted or weaponized. This time, I was choosing. When I walked down the aisle, Michael's eyes softened in that way they always did when he saw me after a long day. He didn't look at me like I was a prize or a burden or a symbol. He looked at me like I was a person, a whole person, one he wanted to build a life with. During the vows, he said something that made my throat tighten. "You've spent your whole life carrying people who never learned how to stand. I promise you'll never have to carry me. I'll walk beside you." I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because the moment felt too steady, too grounded, too real for tears. After the ceremony, my father approached me. He looked older than I remembered, but softer too, like a man who had finally stopped holding his breath. "Thank you for inviting me," he said. I nodded. "I'm glad you came." He hesitated. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I know it's late, but I'm trying." I believed him. Not because he had earned it, but because he had finally chosen honesty over comfort. And sometimes that's enough. He didn't stay long. He didn't linger. He didn't make it about him. He just hugged me, awkwardly, gently, and left. My mother didn't come. She wasn't invited. And for the first time in my life, that absence didn't ache. It relieved. After the wedding, Michael and I spent a week in a cabin near a lake. No phones, no emails, no noise. Just us. The water, the wind, and the quiet. One morning, we sat on the porch with steaming mugs of coffee, wrapped in blankets, watching the mist rise off the lake. The world felt soft, muted, peaceful. Michael looked at me. "You seem lighter," he said. "I feel lighter." He smiled. "You did something incredibly hard. I did something necessary." He nodded. "And now?" I looked out at the water, at the ripples spreading across the surface, at the sunlight breaking through the trees. "Now," I said, "I get to decide who I am without them." He reached for my hand. "And who is that?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I'm someone who survived," I said. and someone who's finally ready to live. Michael squeezed my hand. That's a good place to start. The wind shifted. The lake shimmered. The world felt wide and open, and mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission. I wasn't waiting for approval. I wasn't waiting for love that would never come. I was choosing myself. Fully. Finally. And that, more than the settlement, more than the justice, more than the truth, was the real inheritance. The one no one could ever steal again. If this story hit a nerve, if it reminded you of something you've lived through, or something you're still trying to escape, drop a comment. Someone out there needs to see they're not alone. And if you want more late-night stories about power, truth, and the quiet revenge of finally choosing yourself, subscribe. It tells the algorithm you're awake.